Devoid Wrestling Podcast. Devoid Wrestling Podcast. Devoid Wrestling Podcast. Cast it up, Micah and Derrick. We'll get ready for something you will have never wanted to know. You sadly saw it coming, but I guess you should know. Devoid Wrestling Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Devoid Wrestling Podcast. Today we have an extremely special guest, probably one of the biggest guests in our podcast history thus far, Justin Credible. Justin, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to talk with you. It's great to have this opportunity.
Well, we were going to talk, and some stuff had come up, so I'm finally glad that we're here and we connected. So thank you for your patience.
Yeah, absolutely. Get right into some of these questions, shall we?
Sure, absolutely.
So at the beginning of your wrestling career, you trained for a bit at the Hart Brothers training camp, which was run by Keith Hart. Now, what was that like as a young upstart, being trained by a member of the iconic Hart family?
It was amazing. It was surreal because a lot of my youth, I grew up, of course, watching the Harts, and as I got more and more involved in the business, I became tape trader, read the sheets and stuff. I was aware of the Hart family, Stampede Wrestling and stuff like that. So I was, I was a big fan of the Harts, and also Brian Pillman, he was in WCW at the time, just kind of really breaking out as a big star. He had also been trained up there by the Harts and, wrestled in Stampede. And he was one of my favorite wrestlers at the time in WCW. So it happened not by design necessarily, because I went to camp in Calgary in 1992. I'm from Connecticut, all the way on the East Coast. And back then, without the internet and stuff like that, no social media, and the business was really still kayfabe. I didn't know anyone in the business. It was hard to get into the business, not like it is today. You could find someone online. There's so many schools. So I graduated high school in 91. And during my break, I was working at a grocery store for some extra money, save some money, whatever. I was reading a wrestling magazine on break, and there was a big one-page advertisement for the Hart Brothers pro wrestling camp with a phone number. So I called the number, I spoke to them, and a year later, I saved some money, and I took the journey up north, Wow,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
You just mentioned Pillman being one of your favorite wrestlers back in the day. What were your thoughts on him making his appearances in ECW after his fallout in 97?
It was amazing. He was way ahead of his time. I didn't know, I kind of, when I got into the business in 93, became Aldo in 94. So I kind of lost track of the Brian Pillman career. I wasn't really aware of the ECW stuff because that was before I had gotten there. Because I had only met Brian briefly in the WWE when he was already doing the that lunatic gimmick.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I thought that was way ahead of its time. It would have been an amazing character today, to kind of check it out and see where that would have gone. But yeah, he was so ahead of his time. It was a shame, and I didn't know he was that hurt only after watching that biography on Brian. I think it was Dark Side of the Ring, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. That I knew that all those injuries and accidents were plaguing him. So that answered a lot of questions for me, because I kind of lost track with him being on my own journey in the business. So, yeah.
Have you been following Brian Pillman Jr.'s journey at all through the pro wrestling world?
I have. I actually, Brian and I had spoken a bunch of times, via social media, DMs and stuff. Always offered my help if I could in any way. But he seems to be doing just fine, man. I really, he's very young. And I don't mean young as an age, although he is young in age, but young in the business. He doesn't have a lot of experience. So for him not having a lot of experience, he's certainly on target to do great things, because when I was, I feel like that old man saying, well, in my day, but it really rings true, because when I got into the WWF, the old WWF back then, even before I was Aldo, as PJ Walker, you were on the road wrestling 4 or 5 nights a week, doing house shows. Not only was that great for the pocket, you made good money, but you were out there wrestling, matches all over the world in big coliseums, in front of big crowds, wrestling world-class guys. So you're learning, and you're calling it in the ring, switching it up every night with real professionals. So even before I debuted as Aldo Montoya, even though I was only 23 years old, I'd already had hundreds of matches on the big stage. Not the big stage, but WWF,
Right.
So that was a big advantage. So a lot of these kids, I think, are having that, not that it's a problem, but that difficulty of, and I heard Jim Ross talking about it on a podcast he did with Sports Illustrated, that, a lot of these guys are going to grow and get better because it's a really young locker room, and they're just getting that exposure and that, that first time kind of, you know what I mean, at that high level, other than the indies, because it really is a big difference. As good as you may be in the independent scene, when you step into being on TNT or USA Network and working for big organizations in front of millions of people, it's a game changer, and you have to, you got to learn quick, but everybody's doing good. Brian Pillman's doing real good.
Yeah, so you just mentioned your time period, sort of the pre-Just Incredible days when you were PJ Walker and Aldo Montoya. There was an episode of Raw where you beat IRS with the help of Razor Ramon. Do you remember what it was like, sort of finding out that you were gonna have that big win over IRS?
Yeah, I mean, I knew that I was going to be used in the WWF. I'd spoken to Vince already. Things were in the process of happening, although I was not signed at this point yet. So yeah, it was kind of, because in the WWF to this day, I from what I hear, I haven't been there in a long time, since 2006 or 7. But yeah, they just throw stuff on you, and it's almost like matter of fact. Like like when I won the world title for the only time in ECW, Heyman told me mid-show. Like, people think like we have these huge plans and that I know in advance. You don't. So
Right.
when they gave me the what we're going to do in this match against IRS, and then they said yeah, and then PJ, you roll them up 1, 2, 3, and I'm like, try not to sell it. I'm like,
Right.
me roll him 1, 2, 3, right? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, slip out of there. I'm like, okay, like it's no big deal, right? As a jobber, getting the win over a legend like Mike Rotundo, IRS. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah. So you had that stint, and you also had your stint in the revived ECW in about 2006.
Yep.
Did you notice a huge difference in the locker rooms of WWE between those two time periods?
I sure did. Yeah. I mean, I certainly did in 2001 when when ECW went under, and I went back to tag team with X-Pac as a member of X Factor. Even then it was different. And I remember my first trip back, I was traveling with, it was me and X-Pac. I'll never forget this. We were in the back seat. We rented like a Jeep Cherokee or something like that. Right. Me and Pac are in the back seat. Hunter's driving, Triple H is driving, and William Regal's in the passenger seat. And Kid, X-Pac's rolling a joint. And, we lighted up in the parking lot. Regal was sober at the time, still is, God bless him. And Hunter never did anything ever. But they were cool enough to let us smoke, and didn't think anything of it. We're in the parking lot after Monday Night Raw, after my debut was Justin. So then I get back, we go to SmackDown on Tuesdays, and Stephanie McMahon pulls me aside, and she brings me underneath the bleachers. I'm like, "What's up, Steph?" She goes, "PJ, times have changed." She goes, "You got to kayfabe. You can't just, So even there, not just from that perspective, but just a professionalism, really different, as far as there were no ribs like there were in the 90s. Nobody was, the party scene had really come down a lot. Thank God, because, so many people were dying young. So it was just it was a lot more professional, and just a lot different, though, in some ways. Some good, mostly good, but some a little bit too uptight, where there was not as much freedom to do your own thing in the ring. I'm talking creatively, because back then we had a lot of freedom in the 90s, the mid 90s especially, to still go out there and work. You were given a finish in times, and just a lot different, stifled a bit creatively, where everything had to come from, up top, down to you. And where in the 90s, like Vince McMahon, when he gave me my contract and hired me, he brought me outside, just me and him on a handshake. And he spoke to me, and of course I said yes. And in today's WWE, Vince barely talks to the talent. Where
Right.
back then, even a smaller talented name like Aldo Montoya got to have Vince's ear if I needed to. Like when I had a problem, and I did, when Aldo wasn't doing anything, and I asked for my release to go to ECW, or at first I asked to go to WCW because Kevin Nash and Scott Hall had gone down there, and they were offering me a spot down there. And I went to Vince's office in Stamford and asked for my release. And nowadays it's, which I think is too bad, because there's nothing like having a personal relationship of some extent with Vince McMahon. And I think these men and women that work there, unfortunately, don't have that opportunity, which sucks. You have to go through all the other backward channels.
Yeah. Do you think that has to do with like the increased sort of production value of WWE, or the increase of things they sort of have for Vince's attention to go to?
I perhaps, yes. I know he's still, I know if Brock Lesnar wants to talk to him, or The Undertaker, or Randy Orton, or certain superstars, they can get his attention anytime they want. But I don't know. I think it's done by design now. I think they just have a system in play with a lot more people than used to. Back then there weren't as many people. There might have been Jim Ross or Bruce Pritchard or Pat Patterson, God rest his soul, who I was very good friends with, that were also there as a buffer. Now, from what I understand, there's just so many other people handling that Vince, doesn't really do that. But I think it hurts. I think it hurts everybody, because the more you could have that one-on-one conversation, and go into Vince's office at the live events, or I mean at TV, or at the office, it's important, because if he doesn't know you exist, it's going to be very hard to you know what I mean. And for
Right.
me, I made myself come out of nowhere. Like Vince saw me because I was doing jobs, and I stood out. Similar to the Hardys, they were doing jobs and they were good and stood out to Vince. That's how we kind of got our break, which was unheard of in those days. Where now I think it's so much harder to grab Vince's attention, because there are so many brands and so many moving pieces, that I think it's a little bit of both, and I think it's a lot probably for him to cover all that ground. So I get it.
Yeah. So most people probably know you from your work as Just Incredible in
Sure.
ECW in the late 90s. What was your favorite part about working with ECW at that time period?
I mean, everything. I mean, really everything. It was such a cool environment, both creatively, personally. Like, going to work was not going to work. I mean, it was like a party. And I don't mean that from that point of view. We all worked very hard. I worked extremely hard to become one of the best in the business, period, not just in ECW. So it was great. And Paul Heyman's brilliance was, he was a great motivator, made everybody in that locker room believe in themselves, and would give you the confidence to succeed, and also give you that blank canvas, so to speak, to paint and create your own stuff. That's where their genius lied. I mean, Paul had some really cool ideas, but he allowed the wrestlers to really fill in the blanks. We didn't have agents or producers,
Right.
doing that for us. Paul would give us a finish. He would suggest some things that he would want to see in the match, or tell you some things he'd want to see in the match. But in a whole, it was your match. And that really let all of us work to our strengths, not our weaknesses. And yeah, it was just, we were allowed to do pretty much whatever we wanted, which gave us a ton of freedom to create really memorable content.
Yeah. Do you think that's why the ECW revival in like 2006 sort of felt almost jarringly different than
Yes.
the actual ECW?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, well, in a way, the revival was probably the most I was watching something today about One Night Stand. It was a report from like one of those English YouTube channels from Great Britain,
Mhm.
one of the famous ones, the bigger ones, and they reviewed the whole thing. And that was the only time I think Vince McMahon really stepped off and let Paul Heyman and ECW do what it did. It felt very, at least One Night Stand did. It felt very authentic, and because it was, and they let us do what we did. And then fast forward to Vince's version of ECW, you get all the hands in there and all the people and the producers and this is and that's, and turned it upside down within a couple of months. And something that could have been great, that was arguably what I heard for the first time today. A lot of people say it was arguably one of the best pay-per-views of all time, which I find, I don't know if that's true, but I can understand the enthusiasm, because it was pretty special. I was there. I came out in the first match and I came out in the main event. And it was pretty special. But the reason it was, once again, we were allowed to be who we were, not somebody else's version. And that's why I think the invasion initially failed. The WCW Alliance, ECW Alliance thing failed, is because we were told to be something that we were not. And the One Night Stand that pretty much went untouched by WWE Creative was such a success because it was actually ECW and what fans had come to love and respect from us.
Right. Do you think there's anything that ECW Revival in 2006 got right?
The second one?
Yeah, the one in 2006 where it was the actual show. And
well, we had the one in 2005.
Yeah, the One Night Stand.
The first one. And then the second One Night Stand was like Cena and RVD.
Mm-hmm.
Right off the bat, that's what was wrong. Right off the bat, we had so many WWE influences in there. You had Sabu against Rey Mysterio. I mean, Rey Mysterio was, realistically, when you think about it, was only in ECW for a very short while.
Right.
And Benoit, too, was there for a very short while. Even though they were there for a minute or two, really nothing more than a transition while the 90-day contract clause expired from WCW to WWE. It was almost just like a little stop to go to WWE. At the time, they made it out like they were ECW, like real ECW guys, which is, again, a bait and switch on Vince McMahon's part, trying to get all of his WWE guys in on the ECW thing for whatever reason. So, it was still a good show. It was still very entertaining, but you could already tell on the second One Night Stand that, even though RVD went over on John Cena, the big bad WWE guy, it's still just the fact that Cena was in the ring. We didn't have to go there.
Yeah.
So
right. How do you feel about recently Matt Cardona, as part of his sort of new heel persona in GCW, has started calling himself an ECW original? How do you feel about that?
It's what it is. I like Matt. I like Matt very much. So, look, he's a big fan of ECW.
Right.
I know he was there for the Vince version of ECW, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's doing that. He's doing that to get heat. He knows it. Look, he's taking a risk, right? He's taking a risk doing something different. So I like it. I like the fact that he's wrestling Nick Gage. That hasn't happened yet, I don't believe, right?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah. But just the fact that he's trying different things is cool. I mean, it seems to be working. And, right now there's so many wrestling promotions and so many named guys out there. It's kind of interesting. And guys like Matt have to really fight for, kind of fight for their spot in the business, because it really, really, it could be easy to lose. What I'm trying to say is that, he had some steam coming out of being in the WWE and then going to Impact for a little bit, and for AEW for like one match. But then, like, now he recognizes if you don't do something, you could lose that steam very quickly and just become another named guy without a place to work. And that happens really quick. So, that's a pitfall that a lot of guys have to worry about is, there are so many wrestlers out there without jobs, and a lot of talent, man. There's too much talent for the amount of jobs out there. And there are actually a lot of jobs out there, a lot of promotions. So, right now we're seeing, almost an oversaturation of guys and gals getting into the business, which is weird. Like, I never thought I would be anti men and women getting into the business, but I will explain why. And this is again why when I got in '92, it was still very difficult to get into, because, you don't want wrestlers were supposed to at one point be, not everybody could be an NFL player, right? Not everybody could be an NBA player. And if we started letting everyone in, then there would be no jobs for the wrestlers that are already there, right? It's very easy now to train to be a wrestler. If you have athletic ability and you have $2,500 or $3,000, which is what the schools normally charge, you could be a wrestler. And that's dangerous, right? Because then you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of wrestlers and only a small amount of jobs. So back in those days, the boys it was an oversight. And they, kind of said, well, we don't need any more guys. We have enough guys in these territories, bringing a couple here, a couple there. Now it's just like the floodgates are wide open. So it's becoming a lot more competitive, and, money can only go so far in this business, and it's hard to make money in this business, unfortunately. And so yeah, I wish somehow there was a way to kind of slow down the wave of all of this talent, because unfortunately there's not enough good paying jobs for everyone. So but that's another podcast all in itself. But it's very true though, because that's how they controlled it in those days, with the boys, and as a fraternity. It's like, we can't bring in, we have 100 jobs. What are we going to bring in 100 wrestlers and then have 200 wrestlers with 100 jobs? People don't think that way sometimes, but it's a real problem that we're having nowadays, where people are complaining that WWE doesn't make new stars, and there's like a gap between the legends and, where's the next generation? What happened to them? Well, what happened is they're just nobody's getting a chance, because all of these influx of guys and people getting lost. People like, like myself, for example, I'm a 27-year veteran, 26 or 27-year veteran, I forget. But I kind of skipped that whole generation from 2007 till today, because so many talented guys, whereas I could have been a utility. Now I'm done with my career for the most part. I'm looking at producing and others, outside the ring stuff. But it's like you lose that, you know what I mean? Guys that could have helped bring along the next generation kind of got sidelined for the younger talent. So the torch and the baton never really got passed properly. You know what I mean? With learning from the veterans, because there are a lot of great veterans. X-Pac is one of them too, where, we were around in the early 90s, almost the end of the territory days, right through the Attitude Era and the Monday Night War era into the 2000s. And then, like, all of a sudden, everybody wanted to be a wrestler. And a lot of those guys that could have helped the younger generation on their way out didn't, because, we have 100 fresh faces. None of them know how to work. Now we got a real problem, because there's just an overlap of talent. So that was a big problem, and why new stars, I think, weren't created in the last decade, and we still are relying on the Edges and the Undertakers and other people to come out of retirement to kind of pop a rating or a crowd.
Right. So you were in ECW. ECW's fan base was a very cult following almost fan base.
Yeah.
What was your experience sort of switching from that to going to the more casual, still hype during the shows, but more casual WWE audience?
It was fine, because I'd worked in the WWE for from, I wasn't full time, but 93 I was doing jobs to 97, so a good 4 years of my early career, I spent in the WWE.
Mm-hmm.
And ECW was just a pleasure, though, because they were, a lot of people will say, well, they were scary because they would shit on you if you messed up. And, they were very, very boisterous and loud. And some would say even rude. But that's only if you were the shits, if you weren't any good. If you had their respect and you knew how to work, they always were there for you. And actually made your job much easier, so I loved it. I missed it. Because I rather have a crowd of 2,000 people, let's say in the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York City, than wrestling in the Madison Square Garden in front of, sometimes WWF would only put in, or WWE would only put in 10,000 people in the Garden. But a lot of times, those 10,000 fans in the Garden seemed like it was a half-empty building, and they were hard. Like, they didn't cheer for anything. Like, you could kill yourself, and the fans would be like, "Yeah," like they've seen it all almost. Where at
Right.
ECW, they were just rabid and appreciated it, and you could go full tilt and get that back and forth between the audience. They were so appreciative that it made wrestling easy. Like anything that you did that was good, they popped and went crazy for. Whereas in the WWE and the bigger shows, it was like sometimes like pulling teeth, like they didn't even want to be there. Because a lot of the WWE audiences, kids that like it, younger kids, 10, 11, 12, whatever, and then mom and dad. So a lot of them are just kids sitting on their hand, parents sitting on their hands, looking at the time. When can we get out of here? ECW were, really, 16, 17, 18, 21, 20, like, you know what I mean? Like college kids, younger
Right.
generation, wanting to get drunk and have fun at the wrestling shows. So they were great. They were the best. And I missed it when I got to the WWE, that awesome fan base.
Yeah, you just said like it was hard with that fan base that sort of half cares. I couldn't imagine what it's like, but like for the past year and a half or so of no fans.
Right. Yeah. I've not wrestled one show during the pandemic, like how people do like wrestling just for TV, like how
Right.
Impact has done it. I mean, WWE has the Thunderdome, which is really cool, but I can't imagine how that is, especially when this business, in essence, really, the business is all about going out there and doing something, and also needing the fans to react a certain way, right? Because the way I work, and Stone Cold taught me a lot of this when I worked with him when he first got to the WWE, is like you go out there and you really let them dictate what you do. Like I mean, I remember I had a stretch of about 10 matches with Steve Austin, in a row. And for 10 nights, I worked with him. And every night, all he would tell me was kick stunner, kid. The match could go 10 minutes or it can go kick stunner. We never knew which one it was going to be. We had nights, like I said, we wrestled a competitive match for 10 minutes, boom, 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 all over the place. And then we'd have a match where we go to shake hands, he kicks and stuns me, and that's the end of the night. But he did that by listening to what the people were giving him. Therefore, with the pandemic, you really don't know who's over. You can imagine and think who's over, but the crowd isn't telling you that. You're kind of thinking, like Orange Cassidy was a bit controversial. I cover AEW for Vince Russo's network, and myself and Vince have done it for a while. He stepped off. Now I'm doing it with another gentleman. But in the review shows, I always say, like, Orange Cassidy's told to us that he's over, but how do we really know, right? Only now with fans coming back into the buildings, are we going to see who's really over, right? And even with the WWE and stuff, like who is really over when, we're going to have thousands of fans in the building telling us what they want to see.
Right. Do you think that's affected the booking at all? Not being able to
Huge.
tell who's
Oh yeah.
over?
Yeah. Huge, huge. Cause everybody's going like I think it's affected everybody because like, Vince really doesn't have much of an indicator, except, maybe through, social media or whatever limited feedback, maybe the ratings, right? Like, which segment is watched most. AEW for sure has been affected by that because they're a young company to boot. And they have no real indicators, but yeah, so this is going to be an interesting time. Right. I mean, SummerSlam is going to be amazing and a big kind of measuring stick for where I think the business is going, especially heading into WrestleMania season next year, Royal Rumble WrestleMania season. It's really going to be interesting because I think both promotions are going to change drastically when the crowds are coming back to kind of tell the fans will tell us, what they want to see and who they want to see.
Right.
And it's going
You
to be
just
cool.
Yeah, you just mentioned you cover AEW. What's your favorite sort of act that's going on right now in AEW?
That's a good question. I like Jungle Boy a lot. I think he has a ton of potential, a ton of untapped potential. He's really good as we speak, but he's just starting. I know Jim Ross is a big fan of his as well. Um, who else do I like? I mean, all the top guys, of course, are very, very good. Kenny Omega. Although I have not seen the Kenny Omega from New Japan Pro Wrestling, that wrestling god that everybody talked about, that
Right.
had these 5-star matches. Not to say that he's not great. I just have not seen what was advertised to be this great wrestler. And I had watched some of his New Japan stuff, and it is very impressive. I don't know, it's because the opponents maybe differ here in the States, or what, I don't know what it is, but I still have not seen that Kenny Omega. And I'm not dissing him or anything. I'm just, just from, he had such hype coming in.
Right.
Yeah, I like Jack Perry. Who else do I really like? I mean, MJF, I think, has been a runaway success. I think he's going to be the future big heel, and if not already in AEW. I think he's going to be like their top 5 for a very long time in the business period. I think he's got a tremendous mind for the business. He looks great. He's a businessman, and knows how to work. He's got the good looks. Not too small. Happens to be a big problem, and well, for me at least, because it's okay to be small, and then nothing wrong with it. But Darby Allin, who's another great up and coming act, he's really small.
Yeah.
Jungle Boy's really small. Orange Cassidy, really small. So you have to be careful when you got guys like a Miro or a Lance Archer or other 200+ pound guys, 6'2", 6'3", and then you got smaller guys. It's like you have one extreme or the other. So I'd like to see, some guy, a little bit, you know what I mean? Like, because it's wrestling. There's nothing wrong with being small, but if your whole promotion is built of smaller guys, it takes away a little bit from the attraction, because it's supposed to be what attracted me to wrestling was, I was a kid, it was like Hulk Hogan. He's like a monster and he's jacked. And it's like two gladiators, like almost like superheroes out of a movie. At least it was for me as a kid. And I know it was for a lot of the 80s kids too. So I think, it's cool to have smaller guys, but if you have these extremes of, like I said, Lance Archer, Miro, among others, even Kenny and John Moxley are big compared to Darby Allin, who just looks like, he looks like a little 140-pound skateboard kid, which is okay. But do you expect that kid in a fight with Miro in a bar? How would that go down?
Right.
You know what I mean? I would get my ass kicked by Miro, and I'm 240.
Yeah.
So, I just like to see, some of that a little bit, taken care of. I just don't want to see everybody be like, 150 pounds, because that kind of kills the gimmick.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a few years ago when they were doing a bunch of the NXT call-ups. You never think about their size because they're all around the same
until
size.
They get to the big.
But they had Ciampa and Gargano and everyone on the main roster for a bit, and everyone was sort of towering over them. Yeah.
And it becomes. I mean, and they're amazing. They're so good, right? But you can. It's like you'll only go so far, right? When you get in there, and even like Shawn Michaels, he was the small guy, and he was 6'1", 220. You know what I mean? And that's the small guy. Bret Hart was, 230 pounds, and he was considered small by all accounts. You put in, Gargano against Bret Hart, Gargano is going to look like a smaller guy. In Bret's prime, I'm saying, compared to Gargano's prime, it's like a 50, 60 pound difference, so that's a big deal, So, they got to be cautious of that.
Yeah. Do you notice any similarities between AEW and ECW?
Some, yeah. Some. I see that kind of rebel spirit. They're very much doing things differently than WWE, which is cool. They're certainly not afraid to do old school wrestling stuff, strap matches, cage matches, ladder matches. They obviously get color a lot more than any other promotion has gotten in a long time, which is okay. I hate to see it overexposed though, but I do see some similarities. Sure. Yeah.
What are your thoughts about Chris Jericho's evolution, sort of from his time in ECW to his time in WCW, WWE, and now in AEW?
I think it's been amazing. Jericho, I think, was my 4th match ever, because he came from the Hart brothers as well. He was there the year before I came in. Him and Lance, because Lance ended up being my partner, and also, a lot of people don't know this, ended up doing a lot of my in-ring training at the Harts camp. Because, Keith Hart would come in and he would bark directions from outside, but Lance would be the one because he came through camp the year before and he wanted to keep working out, right? Because he didn't have a full-time wrestling job, so he wanted to stay sharp. So he would come to camp every night and be the guy in the ring, kind of physically showing what Keith was saying. So in essence, really, Lance taught me how to work. So, long story short, Jericho is a huge favorite of mine. I love what he's doing. He's always reinvented himself. And as always, I mean, he's still out there entertaining and putting out quality stuff, Gotta love him.
Yeah.
Gotta love him.
You just mentioned your tag team with Lance Storm, the Impact players over in ECW. What do you think are some challenges in being in a tag team that a lot of people might not realize?
The money. This is a business, and I know sometimes fans don't necessarily like to, or care about discussing it. But for the guys and gals in it, we have a very small window to make money and to save that money for our future. In tag team wrestling, what a lot of people don't know, at least for the WWE, it's always been, let's say Aldo Montoya made $200,000 a year. And which I didn't. But let's just say and if I was a tag wrestler during that same period, I would make $100,000.
Oh,
because they pretty much would say, in tag team wrestling, that's like the draw is like a one person is the draw. The team would be the draw. And maybe it'd be a little over that, but you're pretty much splitting your money. And if there's a manager, you're splitting it almost three ways.
Right.
So, you always, a tag team's always made less money. That could be always a bit hindering. Other than that, I always like tag teams because they extend your career. They extend your your ability to tell stories, especially if you come out of a tag team first, right? Maybe if you're a jabron or an opening match guy, and then you find some success in a tag team, ride that out for 2, 3, 4 years, break off, and then do singles. This kind of like the Rockers model. Because you're allowing yourself a lot more time, as a team, and you're also learning, and you're not, tag matches, you really save your body, because you're doing 50-50 of the work. And then, it's almost like it's a perfect model because after you've learned your craft, the best of your ability, then you really have a good opportunity to succeed as a singles, right? Because you have all that information, all that experience, and you could really maximize your singles run, in the company. So, yeah.
What do you think about the influx of tag teams in the past decade or so that are just kind of two guys thrown together because they don't have anything to do?
Yeah. I mean, it sucks at times. It really does. Especially if there's no plan. Like, I don't mind two guys being thrown together if there's a plan. I remember, who was it? I think it was Owen and Yokozuna, Owen Hart and Yokozuna, two totally opposite guys, but they were managed by Jim Cornette, and they were a good tag team. They were tag team champions for a minute. That stuff I didn't mind. It wasn't bad. I didn't mind that, but I hate the fact that if because they worked an actual gimmick. I hate it when they just put you together and then just throw you out there with no storyline, no acknowledgement of anything else other than you're just two guys going out there. It cheapens everyone out there, and it's unfortunately being done way too much.
Yeah. You when you were in a tag team, did you have any sort of tag teams that you looked up to or were like your inspiration whilst a tag team wrestler?
That's a good question. Yeah, I guess we did. I know we liked to do some tag stuff. I guess Lance and I really liked the old Tully and Arn stuff. That was to me one of the great tag teams, and we liked that. We somehow kept our individual integrity, and it was almost like what I wasn't, he was. He was the technical wrestler. He looked pretty with everything. Like his drop kicks were super cool looking. Get a lot of athleticism in air, and he, good body. Even though, I was in good shape as well, but he really was like jacked up and great technician, but kind of quiet. Didn't say much on the stick. Where I was loud and brash. I had the cut off jean shorts, looked, rugged, talked a lot, posed, did the thing. So it's like what he was, I wasn't. And what I was, he wasn't. You know what I mean? So we blended together well. So it's like we got the best of both worlds, almost like a Neidhart and Bret Hart, where there were two totally different wrestlers, but it worked, right? They worked well as a team. They had their double team moves. And that's kind of what Lance and I were. We were different, but yet worked well together and calculated. I love the Impact players, and I think Lance did too. We're two-time ECW tag champs, and those are one of the things I don't think we get as much credit as we probably should have, because we had some really, really fun and good matches, especially against who are those guys from Japan? Oh my God! Goto. Anyways, we had one of the best ECW matches against these two guys from FMW, and you got to go back and see it. But we just had underrated fun matches in ECW.
Who was your favorite person to be in the ring with?
Oh wow, favorite person to be in the ring with would probably be Jerry Lynn. Him and I had epic matches. I don't think we've ever had a bad match. But I also loved being in the ring with Tommy Dreamer and Sabu. Those guys, definitely.
Yeah. So a few years ago, you were doing this YouTube series called Pro Wrestling 101.
Oh yeah.
You went through the ins and outs of professional wrestling. First off, I was telling my good friend James, who I do a different podcast with, about it, and he actually specifically told me to thank you for that series because it taught him a lot about the ins and outs of the pro wrestling business and whatnot.
Oh wow! Well, thank you. And tell him I said thank you. And actually, it's funny you say that because I was looking through YouTube today, ironically enough. And just like, because I haven't messed with it in a while, I had, I still have 14,500 subscribers. So, and I had so many positive things said to me about Pro Wrestling 101 that I'm thinking of going back and doing more.
Oh.
Yeah. So,
awesome.
The reason I stopped doing them was I worked with this guy, Doug. And he was, I knew him from the WWE network. He worked for the WWE. And once he got let go, he came to my house and we shot like most of the series or the first couple waves of the series in a couple days. We just switch backgrounds, switch T-shirts, and because he knew how to do it. And he was a professional, obviously. So he made it look cool and professional. Whereas, I could shoot it, but I don't know how to do any of that other stuff. So I didn't want to put out an inferior looking thing.
Right.
So if I could get somebody like that can help me with production, I'd like to put that channel to work because, even though it's not a huge number, 14,500 subscribers still, with a show like Pro Wrestling 101 that was wildly popular, would be cool to kind of get back out there again, because so many people did appreciate it. And it's always cool to help people, and I love doing that stuff. So.
Is there any episode you think you would remake for a more modern wrestling world?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. Most I would keep because not most, the first maybe 10, because they really are the core. Like, even if you start a wrestling school or you start training at a wrestling school, those were like black and white blueprints that I would always keep. But yes, I would have I'd make different episodes with like maybe a branch off or an updated version, maybe a more advanced, go into it a little deeper, right? Like if I talked about selling, maybe I'd dig a little deeper into it, because what I talk about when I talk about selling, I talk about it in a very general, classic way, the way I was taught. But there would definitely be room, like you said, with the business changing. It's been about 10 years since I did those. There's always growth, right? And there's always things changing. So I could definitely add branches to that tree. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you interviewed several people on that
Yes, I
show.
did. Yeah.
What was your favorite? Who was your favorite person to interview?
Hmm.
If you had to say you had one.
I don't know. I don't think I had one. Probably the one I remember most, only because I look up to him so much. Even though he just rambled, I just stood there, looked at him, and marked out, was Terry Funk.
Mm.
Just because I got to sit there for 10 minutes and look at Terry and just like be in awe of him, because I got to work with him and wrestle with him and against him. He was just an all-time favorite. I had a lot of good ones that were kind of that were deep. I had a good one with Tommy Dreamer. I had a good one with Dustin Rhodes. I'd say those three.
Who would you interview from like today's wrestling if you were to have more interviews on the show?
That's a good question. Wow. I'd like to do a lot of AEW guys. I'd really like to get into their minds. I would love to do MJF. I would love to do Orange Cassidy. And I'd love to do Jungle Boy. Jungle Boy to me is, I can't say enough good things about him. Just a big fan. And so those are a couple right off the bat that I would love to really kind of get in their heads and see what they're thinking. Absolutely.
Yeah. You keep talking about Jungle Boy. I'm just very excited for this Saturday's match.
I know, me too.
Kenny.
Me too. Yeah. I can't wait till they get back to normal broadcasting times, because they play so late. I'm old, man. I'm 47, so I'm in bed by 9 o'clock, dude. You can't get me up, so it's a pain in the ass for me to watch the show, but it's going to be a good one. I'm looking really forward to it. I think it's going to be a hell of a match. I'm really I mean, he's not going to win, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. And this could really these are one of those matches that if Kenny does his job, Jungle Boy could look great in defeat here if he gives him that match. You know what I'm saying? If he takes him to the limit, even though Omega will probably most likely still go over, it could it can make Jungle Boy look really good. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. Hope they pull it off.
Oh yeah, me too. Do you think there's any like AEW roster member that could break into like the mainstream the way that like The Rock and John Cena have?
If there was one at this moment, I would say MJF. Another one that I don't know I don't know, but I see something in him too that is getting a lot of press, and he looks really cool. He still has a lot to learn, but I think he could do something. Is Sammy Guevara as well? I think his attitude and his brash cock, something about the kid that I like. I do. But right now, I would say MJF. Although, and I'm not talking about wrestling. I'm talking about, for a Hollywood guy, the stature of The Rock. MJF is a bit smallish, even though he's not that small, but like Rock's like such an Adonis, even for an action movie. We talk about pro wrestling, like, small is sometimes the bad word, but not even that, for to be a big action star like Dwayne The Rock Johnson, he has that presence, that height, that width, that look, you know what I mean? That $1 million look. So, but I think MJF has enough character and enough, the promo ability, the speaking ability is there, the charisma certainly there. So if anybody, I would say MJF, definitely.
Do you think MJF is sort of the start of a return to keeping kayfabe alive, more so than it is kept alive now?
Possibly. I think he's brilliant at it. I think fans know what he's trying to do,
right?
But he almost, he puts you in that uncomfortable situation where, is he kidding? Oh, he's got to be kidding,
right?
Or maybe he's not, But that's where you got to be. I always had a trick, and Terry Funk taught me this. When I was wrestling on a main level, and I still try to pull this off when I occasionally wrestle today. If somebody gives me something that looks a little stiff, or maybe is a little stiff, I try to sell it like it was a shoot, and I almost break character in the ring. and I'll maybe stop selling for a minute. Like I get pissed at the guy I'm in there with. Like, what the fuck, dude? Why'd you
Right.
stiff me? Trying to make fans think, did something just go south here? Is he really pissed at him? So I try to break down that wall, and I'm working the whole time. But I've
Right.
done it a bunch of times where I make people believe that something just changed here. Like that
Right.
was all they were working. But now I see Justin, like, maybe I won't sell something and just like, go from full sell to be like, what the fuck, asshole?
Right.
And like really get like, shoot, give you that look. And then you can see people start to wonder, so you got to try and explore that space. It's getting more and more difficult, but I always try. I always try to do a little something, you know what I mean? Just to see if you can, right?
And it's always like greatly successful when a program incorporates that sort of idea, like the Punk program back in 2011.
Sure. And you gotta measure it. You gotta measure it perfectly, right? You can't go over the top with it. It's gotta be subtle.
Right.
Especially at first. It's gotta be very subtle. And you gotta really think, if it was real, how would it, you know what I mean? It can't be over the top. It's gotta be little subtleties at first to get people thinking and talking. When you get them thinking and talking, you're halfway there,
Right.
So
Is there anybody, before you fully retire from the pro wrestling world, is there anybody that you would love to have a match with?
Not really. I mean, for fun, I know I'm not in the physical shape right now to do it because I'm fat and out of shape. I ain't gonna lie. But I'm grateful that I'm not injured in any way. Like my body, there's nothing holding me back. My knees are good. My back is good. My neck is good. I'm blessed like that. I'm just not in good physical shape. I got to work out. But if I were, I'd love to work with Moxley. I think we could have our styles would really, really mesh well. And I think I could give a pay-per-view performance if I was given 6 months to get in shape. But of course, I mean, that's not going to happen. But I would like that to happen. That would be fun.
I would love to see a match between you and Moxley, honestly.
Yeah,
Just thinking about that is very
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun.
Do you think Moxley has finally sort of shed the WWE guy label that he sort of had going back in?
I think so. As much as he's going to, I don't think he's going to shed any more. He's done a great job. I think he's done, everything he can to kind of go back to his roots. And I think he's in a good place. He's in the best place that he can be in for his personality and for what his strengths are. Of course he can do the WWE thing. He did it successfully for years, but I think he's very comfortable in AEW, and I think it suits him well. And what he's doing when he comes back will suit him well as well.
Do you think AJ Styles, since you also mentioned AJ just a minute ago, do you think if he were to leave today, do you think he would have that label, even though he's very much done a lot more outside of WWE?
I'm not sure. I'd say 50-50, because when you're in the WWE as long as he has been, and quite frankly, it was surprising. Well, I don't know if it was surprising, but when you go to the WWE, you never can tell if somebody is going to make it or not. Although AJ forever has had the ability, no doubt about it, since the early 2000s. I remember seeing him first work when I was in NWA, TNA, and NWA, TNA, those Tuesday night tapings where AJ first started to come out. Then I knew he had it. But once you're in the WWE for as long as he has been in now, and as successful as he's been, and he's going to finish his career there, from what I understand, the contract he just signed, he's going to be forever known as the WWE guy, which is funny because he has done so much other. He's had a great career, man. One of a kind career, really.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, I've got one more question, not wrestling related at all, before we end. Sure. What are your thoughts on Sunny D?
On who?
On Sunny D, the beverage, the orange beverage.
I hate it. I don't like it. Why?
Me and Micah have a sort of bit going on our channel because I enjoy Sunny D. I love Sunny D personally.
I had it too much as a kid. That's why I don't like it. Like my mom always had it in the house.
See, I think I'm the opposite. I feel like I didn't have a ton of it as a kid, and then I grew up and I was like, you know what, I should try this again. And I just like fell in love with it almost. Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. See, my downfall is like old school, straight up Coca-Cola, which I was drinking during the podcast, and that's horrible. Like Coca-Cola is like straight up poison. I don't do Diet Coke. I don't do Pepsi. I do old school red and white Coca-Cola. I love it. Ice cold Coke. Forget about it, especially fountain drinks.
Yeah, you can't argue with that, man.
Yeah.
Regular
but
Coke.
yeah, Sunny D was great, but my mom always went to like Aldi or whatever, and like that's one of the things she always got us was like a ton of Sunny D in the house because she was too cheap to buy like regular OJ.
Right.
So yeah, I just had my fill of it, I guess, during my youth.
Yeah, that's very fair. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I had a great time, man.
Yeah, me too. Questions. Really appreciate it. Is there anything you want to plug or throw out there before we end the episode?
Yeah, I'll just throw this out there real quick. Just if you want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at PJ Polaco. And if you want a t-shirt, I have over 20. Go over to prowrestlingtees.com/justincredible. And that's it.
Alrighty, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for watching, and
thank you guys.
See you next time.
Absolutely.